Will we see him regularly?
I don't know that you'll see him more than 40 times a month, but I'm happy to ask him that question.
No, they're so cute at that age. You know, the Q&A, her definition of the Q&A is, hey, Mr. Biden, what's your favorite flavor ice cream? That's what a Q&A is. Joining me now, conservative Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, always great to see you. The press did their best to hide Biden's shortcomings and mental lapses during the campaign, but they can't hide him once he's in the Oval Office, right?
Well, it kind of sounds like they miss President Trump, doesn't it, Chris? I mean, they like the engagement, they like the transparency, and for all of the unfairness that President Trump had to suffer at the hands of the press, he was far more open and honest about what was actually happening in our country. And I understand why Joe Biden wants to be kept away from tough questions. First, it seems he has some problems just issuing statements and remembering the members of his own cabinet, but also we've got a country that's in lockdown in many places. We've got a border that is suffering a quiet invasion. CNN even reporting earlier today 100,000 contacts or apprehensions at the border just in the last month. And even more is coming with legislation that institutionalizes the fraud that allowed Joe Biden to win this last election in the first place.
Yeah, and speaking of H.R. 1, which will nationalize our voting system, making it easier for foreign nations to hack our elections, it will further undermine our elections' integrity. It even prevents states from passing voter ID laws. The good news is that this attack on America can't be passed through reconciliation. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. Democrats would either need a substantial number of Republicans willing to vote their way to a political death sentence, which seems unlikely, or they will need, some other mechanism because they don't have the votes necessary, and this is not a budget issue that would allow them to take action with just 51 votes. So this is dead on arrival in the Senate, but it shows their game plan, their strategy. And remember, they don't have to pass H.R. 1 to execute on election fraud. Stacey Abrams did just fine without H.R. 1 in Georgia. But we can't just play defense, Chris. We can't just be in Washington voting against and debating against H.R. 1. We need Republican legislatures to step up to enforce photo ID and to ensure that you don't just have millions of mail-in ballots swirling around the country that aren't connected to the identity of an actual human being with the intent to vote that ballot. We see that work underway in Georgia, but we need to see it in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in a number of states where election integrity needs to be more of a priority.
Now, you mentioned that the Democrats would actually need Republicans to come on over. They may want to knock on Liz Cheney's door. They might want to knock on Ben Sass or Mitt Romney's door. They seem willing to play ball with socialists.
Well, if they were knocking on Liz Cheney's door, they'd have to knock on her door in Washington, D.C., not Wyoming, because she doesn't spend a lot of time out west.
True enough. True enough. The Texas lawsuit, which was dismissed allegedly because of lack of standing by the Supreme Court, it never had its merits heard by the High Court. Don't the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, don't they need to answer for what they did in 2020?
Absolutely. If the state of Georgia was polluting a waterway and that was flowing in to the Sunshine State of Florida, we would have a cause of action against them, and the Supreme Court would be obligated to look at it through their original jurisdiction. But if they pollute our republic, if they pollute the election process, if they degrade the confidence that all Americans have in the outcome of a presidential contest, apparently the Supreme Court doesn't want to exercise jurisdiction. This is what is so frustrating about our Article III courts, the lack of courage, the lack of ability to step forward and exercise jurisdiction where there are issues that have to be resolved. And so if they're not going to do their job, we have to do ours. We have to ensure that when a vote is counted, someone actually intended to cast that vote. And because we didn't catch them in the act in the last election, they were able to keep the power that they stole. And so next time, we need the integrity on the front end, and we need aggressive enforcement so that when people are trying to harvest ballots, generate illegal ballots, that there's an opportunity to showcase that to the country and demand better.
Yeah, and I just want the law followed. You know, I'm just one of these very simple guys who believes you should follow the law, and that goes for governors, and that goes for courts, and that goes for anybody involved in the process. Speaking of not following the law, let's turn to Biden's border disaster. Jen Psaki refusing to acknowledge that this is a crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. Watch.
At this point, is this a crisis at the border?
Look, I don't think we need to sit here and put new labels on what we have already conveyed is challenging.
It's challenging. Meanwhile, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas reportedly calling up DHS staff to volunteer to help deal with what he says is an overwhelming number of aliens rushing the border. Will the press and Biden be able to hide this crisis the same way, Congressman, they're hiding him?
Great question. But the crisis at our border is going to reach biblical proportions, with the folks swirling around Central and South America, headed north, believing that they are going to receive an invitation at the border as a consequence of Joe Biden's catch and release policies. We largely had this problem under control in the Trump administration. We built 400 miles of wall. We ensured that people awaited their asylum claims in their home country, and we established relationships in the Northern Triangle for safe third country status so people could be repatriated rather than just being released into our country. And Joe Biden is undoing all of it. And the travesty of this is that children are going to be abducted, rented, sold like fast passes at Disney World to people who are trying to come across our borders illegally. It shouldn't take a genius to know, Chris, that if you treat people differently when they bring a kid, more people are going to bring a kid. And that is a humanitarian crisis, and this is a direct consequence of Joe Biden's pro-caravan policies.
Indeed. With all this going on, Congressman, Communist China continues its malign activity, with Democrat socialists, all of them, turning a blind eye. But the Florida Speaker and Governor DeSantis says Florida will defend its citizens from Communist China, absent pro-American administration officials in the Biden administration and, of course, your colleagues across the aisle. Should other states follow Florida's lead?
Great question. Here in Washington, the Biden administration has tossed the keys to China, but great leaders at the state level, like Speaker of the House Chris Sprowls, have laid out a blueprint for resiliency for our people. That means not allowing China to infiltrate our colleges and universities. It means protecting our inventors and intellectual property and ensuring that we are not the victims of birthright citizenship by fraud, something that wealthy Chinese access all too often in our country. Every state legislative leader should look at what House Speaker Chris Sprowls has done in Florida, take that up, and our country will be stronger and safer and prepared for the real challenge we face against the Middle Kingdom, rather than following Joe Biden into more misadventures in the Middle East.
No, I think we got to. I think we have to. All the states who are interested in protecting their citizens, because the federal government is abdicating its responsibility protecting us from China, and the virus we're all having to endure is evidence of that. Congressman Matt Gaetz, sir, I appreciate the time, and come back soon.
Thank you, Chris.